Most people believe power makes noise. They believe it announces itself through confidence, through volume, through being seen and heard. But if you slow down long enough, you'll notice something unsettling. In every tense moment, a heated discussion, a confrontation at work, a disagreement that suddenly turns personal, the person who speaks the most is usually the one losing control. They talk faster. They explain more. They repeat themselves, not because they are strong, but because something inside them feels threatened. And power never comes from threat. Power comes from stability. Pause. The uncomfortable truth is this. When you feel the urge to respond immediately, that urgency is already a signal that something is pulling you out of center. People don't argue because they love truth. They argue because silence feels like erasure. When someone challenges your opinion, your nervous system reacts before your mind does. It doesn't ask, "Is this correct?" It asks, "What does this say about me?" So you defend, you justify, you sharpen your tone, not to clarify, but to protect your identity. And the more personal the topic, the more dangerous the argument becomes. Politics, beliefs, values, status. At that point, the conversation is no longer about ideas. It's about survival. And survival mode thinking is the enemy of power. Pause, because power requires distance, perspective, the ability to step back while others rush forward. Reaction feels strong, but reaction is exposure. Every unnecessary word leaks information. It reveals where you feel insecure, what triggers you, how badly you want to win. And once someone knows those things, they don't need to overpower you. They just need to press the right button. The person who controls your emotions controls the interaction. That's why arguments often spiral. Not because the issue is complex, but because both sides are bleeding control. At the same time, the louder the exchange, the weaker the position. True authority never rushes. It allows others to exhaust themselves first. The most formidable individuals in history were not reactive men. They weren't cold. They were disciplined. They didn't suppress emotion. They mastered it. There is a critical difference. Suppression builds pressure. Mastery builds choice. And choice is the foundation of authority. A man who can pause, even when provoked, is a man who owns the moment. Not because he avoids conflict, but because he decides when it matters. Silence, in this context, is not absence. It is ownership of self. Consider Marcus Aurelius, an emperor with absolute power, yet obsessed not with conquest, but with restraint. In private, he reminded himself daily, do not react to insult. Do not rush to judgment. Do not allow others to pull you into disorder. He understood something most leaders never do. If you cannot govern your own inner state, no external authority will save you. Marcus didn't fear losing arguments. He feared losing himself. And that fear kept him precise. That is not weakness. That is command at the highest. Now, bring this into the modern world. Watch how real power moves in finance. When markets panic, noise explodes. Experts shout, predictions multiply. Fear demands reassurance. But the most powerful figures go quiet. They wait. They study how panic distorts behavior, how emotion reveals weakness, how impatience creates opportunity. They don't speak to calm others. They wait for clarity to return. And when they act, they don't explain themselves. Results do the talking. That silence isn't indifference. It's preparation. Then there are moments where silence carries moral weight. Nelson Mandela understood this deeply. Decades of imprisonment could have turned his voice into rage, but rage would have limited him. So he waited, not passively, strategically. When he finally spoke, his words didn't seek revenge. They reshaped a nation. That is the difference between expression and influence. Anyone can speak. Few can change the direction of history. Silence disrupts expectations. Most people expect reaction. They expect defense. They expect escalation. When it doesn't come, the mind scrambles. Without resistance, the other person loses orientation. They fill the gap with words, with explanations, with emotion. And in doing so, they expose themselves. Silence forces others to confront their own noise. This is why it feels uncomfortable. Not because silence is empty, but because it is revealing. Silence is not the answer to everything. Avoiding all conflict is not wisdom. It is fear wearing discipline as a mask. The disciplined man knows when to engage. He speaks when boundaries must be set, chaos must be corrected, truth must be anchored. He stays silent when ego demands validation. Emotion clouds judgment. Nothing productive can emerge. Power is not silence alone. Power is selective engagement. Silence is not the answer to everything. Avoiding all conflict is not wisdom. It is fear wearing discipline as a mask. The disciplined man knows when to engage. He speaks when boundaries must be set, chaos must be corrected, truth must be anchored. He stays silent when ego demands validation. Emotion clouds judgment. Nothing productive can emerge. Power is not silence alone. Power is selective engagement. Some ideas aren't meant to be consumed quickly. They're meant to stay with you. To change the way you pause, the way you respond, the way you decide whether a moment deserves your voice, this space exists for that kind of thinking. No noise, no urgency, only what's necessary, shared when it's ready.